right, welcome back for another CBSI Hot 10 show. Make sure you go over to comicbookinvest.com and check out the article where I may put a few extra tidbits and details that I don't cover here on the show tonight. And while you're at it, check out all the other shows we have here on the channel. Please let me know what you think in the comments down below. Make sure that you like, you subscribe, you hit the alert button so you don't miss anything. Keep telling your friends so we can keep growing the channel. And if you want to see this week's list, don't worry, I got you covered. I'll be back right after this short little break.
Notable sales.
And our first notable sale is a classic Jim Lee X-Men number 11. However, this is not the first print. This is technically the second print cover, or reprint, if you will. This is the Pressman edition. This was a mail-away edition that isn't all that easy to find, especially in a 9.8 grade. Because, again, it's just not that many of them out there. This was actually, I think, shipped with the X-Men board game, I believe, or something like that from back in the day. So this is from the 90s, a board game comic, and one of the few weird oddball things we may see here on the list today. But a 9.8 of this book did sell this week, and it did sell for an interesting number. Surprising, if you will. Not an all-time high, mind you, but still a decent amount, as a 9.8 sold for just over $1,000 at $1,005 on an accepted best offer on a $1,200 ask. Now, this last sold for $895 back in November of last year, and I think the all-time high is somewhere around $1,100, but pretty close, but not quite there with that $1,005 accepted offer. But still, definitely something notable because, again, it's not something you see all that often. And one of those weird little fun books that we can make as a little note in history of it coming with a board game. So, with that said, Silver Foil edition of X-Men 11 is our first notable sale, while the next one is another book that is very near and dear to my heart. It's one that I actually started the show Chasing Ghosts with, and I'm still chasing this one. Still looking, still hunting, still searching, and one day I may find it. And this week's sale was in my range, maybe. A 9.8 sold this week of Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow number 9. 9.8. Retailer Incentive Edition. This is a 1 in 10, after all. Classic homage to Purple Rain. Prince, big fan of Prince as well. Love this cover. Really want to get this one in my collection one of these days. And at the price this one sold for, I would have considered it. It's still a decent chunk of change, but it went before I could see it. Now, 9.8 sold this week on an accepted offer of $1,600. Which seems like a huge number, but considering the ask was $4,949. And if you just simply look at eBay, it'll look like it's sold for that price. You'd have to do a little bit of digging through the product research to see that it was an accepted offer, and it was for $1,600, which is still a nice chunk of change, but not quite $5,000. So keep that in mind. This last sold for $1,800 back in September of last year, so it's down a little bit from then. And like I said, $1,600 is a lot of money, and this is one that I might have thought about it if I saw it at that price. Granted, I would never have considered offering $1,600 on a $5,000 ask, but hey, sometimes you take a shot and you win, I guess. With that said, I'll still keep hunting because I'd rather just have a raw one. I don't need a 9.8 personally, but it still was a notable and interesting sale for the week. So I figured, you know what? Let's bring it up, let's show it off, and let's talk about it. Now, with that said, we still have the Hot 10 coming, but before we get to the Hot 10, I want to remind you that you can get 10% off your BCW order. Get your bags, your boards, your long boxes, your short boxes, CGC boxes, top loaders, even pages and stuff for your cards and top loaders for your cards. Basically anything that'll keep your comics or collectibles safe. You can find something over at BCW, and you can save 10% off your entire order by using my code RENA10. That's right. Renna10, save yourself 10% off your entire order. You help out the channel, you get yourself a little discount, and, you know, no harm, no foul. With that said, speaking of 10, we now have the Hot 10 starting up right now.
Number 10.
Our first book coming in here is new this week. This is The Curse of Shirley Johnson, the 1 in 50 incentive by Ryan Otley. I admittedly am not a big fan of this cover. It's just not my favorite. I prefer the Todd McFarlane B cover by far. I think originally it was supposed to be the black and white version or something to be the incentive, and that would have been a better play because I just don't really care for this one all that much. It's just kind of bland to me. Just my opinion. Just my opinion. That said, it is not shared by everyone because we've already had over a dozen sales of this 1 in 50, and it is averaging $106. That's right, double ratio on this thing with a cover set also doing about 150. So this is someone who's selling, the other open order covers along with the 1 in 50, and then we got the special reprint of Spawn number 5, which is a whole separate deal that we may get into a little bit later. But the 1 in 50 here on its own, over $100 on average. Double ratio is quite impressive to start off our list. But like I said, it's just not my favorite cover of the bunch. But that all said, let's keep it rolling and see what we got next in at number 9.
Number 9.
And speaking of that reprint, here it is. This is the Spawn 5 reprint, which apparently you had to order at least 10 copies of that Curse of Shirley Johnson book, and then you were allowed to order, I guess, as many of these reprint editions of Spawn 5 for the low, low price of $1.95. So retailers could get this for $1.95, which was the original sale price back in the 90s. And you could get that if you ordered at least 10 copies of that Shirley Johnson book. And some shops did. And then they could charge whatever I guess they would like for this book, considering it cost the shop $1.95. They got to charge a little bit more to make some sort of profit. But with that said, most are selling in that $2 to $5 range, but this has hit highs of $13 already with over 55 sales already this week. So a lot of interest in this Spawn 5 because I thought you could still find the original in $1 boxes. Just like a week or two ago, I'm like, we could still find a lot of old Spawn run. Like under issue 30, you could find, granted, not Spawn 1 these days, but you can still find plenty of those early Spawn issues for cheap out there because they printed a lot of them. But apparently, I was wrong. Shops have been charging quite a bit for the original edition, so maybe the reprint is a better play for you at this point. With that all said, that's our number 9 book for the week. This is going to be an interesting one this week. Trust me, once we get into the nuts and bolts of this, you'll see all of these books are stacked pretty close. It's a tight race between numbers, and we can argue, order, and rank all day long because it is a very close race between a lot of these books. But I make the calls. It's my list, so I'm giving you what I think here at number 8.
Number 8.
And at number 8, I have Jocasta's first appearance, the female Ultron, if you will, at one time. This is Avengers 162, rumor being that she will be playing a version of the Vision's wife in this Vision series that we are eventually going to be getting. So, a lot of interest going back to this book. I don't want to get into the convoluted history of Hank Pym's brain patterns being used and Janet Van Dyne's brain patterns being used in these robot forms, because that's not exactly how it plays out in the MCU. So we'll see how it does play out in the MCU. But this classic George Perez book, George Perez cover, seen an increase of over 500% this week with those rumors and those talks. So that's a couple dozen sold thereabouts. Raw averaging about $18 with highs hitting $40 raw. CGC 9.8s on this one are $275 right now. A lot of increase, quite a jump, like I said, in volume just based off of these rumors. So we'll see if all of this holds. But it is a classic Avengers book and one that you might want to keep in mind anyway. Now, with that said, let's keep the list rolling and get on to lucky number 7.
Number 7.
Lucky number 7 is a book that came out last week, and I think this cover may have even gotten delayed at a lot of shops. And this is the first cover appearance of Powerlift. And yes, she does appear inside the guts of this book as well. So making this book the one of choice because she's first appearance and she is on the cover. This is Miles Morales Spider-Man number 33, the Torn and Clark cover, and Powerlift is the newest hulked out Hulk character that we can expect. The protege of Doc Samson now gets Doc Samson-esque super strength powers, and because he's Dr. Sasquatch these days. But with that said, cover price book basically last week with a couple dozen sold. It's now averaging about $10 with highs hitting $20 on this. One of those new first appearances that, get the market a bit interested. People start chasing, people start hunting. Again, some shops might have gotten delayed on getting their copies of this cover, but it seems to be the cover of choice again for this first appearance of Powerlift. May not be the greatest name in the world. We'll see how this goes as the character continues to show up in comics from here on out. Because again, she's been around for a while, the therapist, but now with her as a Hulk character, we'll see how well that does in the Marvel universe going forward. Now, with that said, let's keep it going and see what we got next at number 6.
Number 6.
And at number 6, we have the Mark Spears Evil Dead homage cover, however you choose to say it. You could say it all 3 ways, depending on where you live. This monsters cover is the first print, 1 in 20 incentive for the first print, the 5th print of the first issue of Monsters. Man, that's a lot to say. Mark Spears Monsters, number 1, 5th print, 1 in 20 incentive cover. Homage to Evil Dead. Pretty cool cover. I dig it. I love the distress lines here. I do like the look to a movie poster when comic covers do that. And a lot of folks are liking this book to the tune of over 25 sales, averaging $78, hitting highs of $100. And when I say highs, multiple $100 or $99.99 sales. So $100 basically this has been going for as of late. Big number for a 1 in 20. I mean, that's 5 times ratio, and something that probably could have seen coming, considering how we've seen a lot of these incentives played out. Granted, not every incentive hits like this, but you mix in a few of the details, you get the homage in there, get that angle. I'm not surprised to see a lot of interest in this book. With that said, still over 24 sales. Not too bad for an incentive for this week. But that's what we have on the bottom half of the list. Let's see what we have for you on the top half. And again, we can argue order on a lot of these books. So with that, let's get right to it at number 5.
Number 5.
At number 5, on the outside looking in last week, I struggled where to place this one because based on volumes, it feels right here at number 5. And this is What If, number 105, the Ron Friends cover. This is the first appearance of Mayday Parker, who Sadie Sink is apparently going to be playing in the next Brand New Day movie. I mean, that seems to be a confirmed rumor at this point. I don't know. Regardless, a lot of folks going for this book. Again, over 25 sales, up 400% from last week when I told you to keep an eye on it. Averaging $225. That's for any copy. Raw alone copies are looking at about $92. And the reason why I had to say the average is $225 because there were 9 CGC 9.8 sales this week. So out of those couple dozen sales, 9 of them were 9.8s. And the high, 410, a couple $400 sales, some 350s and 375s in there. But 9 CGC 9.8 sales this past week for this book, which is something that is kind of outside the norm. And why I did consider putting this one higher, but the overall volume still felt right in this spot. And you'll see why as we move on with the list. But Mayday Parker, we'll have to keep an eye on this one because there's still plenty of copies listed. So we'll see how the volumes do in the weeks ahead as we get more and more confirmation and news about what we are getting in the next Spidey film. But with that said, let's keep it rolling and get to our next book.
Number 4.
And at number 4, we have another seeming strange confirmation of a movie appearance, and that is Baby Joey, apparently. The toy that was spotted on shelves out there for the new Superman film seemed to confirm that Baby Joey will be showing up in the Superman film and maybe playing an integral role in the film. That would be the son of Metamorpho. Makes a lot of sense to fit into this, what we've seen so far in the trailer. But Justice League Europe, number 11, is that first comic book appearance of Metamorpho's son. This is a book by Kevin Maguire there on the cover. And yeah, Giffen Maguire, classic run, Justice League Europe. 30 plus sales this week, most of which were very cheap. I mean, this is technically a dollar bin book. This was a dollar bin book forever. And even some of these sales this week were for $1 to $2, up to $5. But the high did hit $17. And with the volumes, this thing seems to be clearing out at all those cheap prices. So we'll see going forward what the new floor is going to be. It's probably going to be close to that $10 mark at this point. But who knows? Still should be plenty of cheap copies out there for you to go to scoop up at your shops. Go out there digging because Justice League Europe books, I'll be honest, weren't the biggest deal in the world. These weren't the most expensive books out there. So you may be able to secure a copy for cheap if you decide to do a little bit of digging. And if you're interested in Baby Joey. Now, That said, that is our number 4 book, but let's keep it going and get to our next one here at number
3.
And at number 3, we have one of the 3 rumored villains for the next Spider-Man film, Brand New Day, and that is the first appearance of Tombstone. Lonnie Lincoln has already shown up in that animated series, Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, which was a surprise hit for many. I enjoyed it quite a bit, but that caused this book to spike not that long ago. Once it's hitting now again because we might be getting a live action version of Lonnie. And that said, with Web of Spider-Man number 36, our first appearance of Tombstone with over 30 sales this week, this is up 700% in volume from last week. Raw is averaging about $15, highs hitting 30 again. CGC 9.8s are still pretty up there at $316. Again, this book has been on the cycle before because of the animated appearances, but live action appearances trump all. So we'll see if this is now the new floor, the new high, or what. Also, if we actually get confirmation of who's going to be in this film, because right now we'll have to chalk this up to just being rumor, but rumor is a lot of times enough to start selling books. So this book is doing well this week, and first appearance of Tombstone is one that a lot of folks are grabbing up there because it is, at an affordable price. Now, with that said, let's get to our next book at number 2.
Number 2.
And at number 2, we have another one of the rumored villains, and that is Boomerang. And surprisingly, Boomerang shows up all the way back in Tales to Astonish number 81. And you would think this Jack Kirby Stan Lee book would be more expensive than it actually is, but I guess Boomerang was never a huge key for many folks. So it is actually still kind of an affordable book considering how old it is. With over 35 sales this week. This one's hitting a little bit more volume than the last one, averaging about $35. That's not too bad. Again, considering the age of this book and how hard it could be to track one down, $35 ain't bad, with highs hitting $95 this week for raw copies of the first appearance of Boomerang. Now, the other first appearance in this, or the other third rumored villain, is Scorpion, and that's already a classic early edition of Spider-Man. So yes, copies have sold, but it's pretty pricey. Where I think that's made it more angle and more affordable for folks to go and chase Boomerangs and Tombstones rather than Scorpions. That said, I'm not trying to spoil what the number 1 book is, but it is not the first appearance of Scorpion. We're going a different route with our number 1 book. So if you're curious to see what it is, don't worry, I got you covered. It's coming right now.
And our number 1.
In our strange week, topping this list, we do have that Superman special of Friendship Unleashed, the Milkbone comic book. That's right, you had to order a box of Milkbones to secure yourself a copy of this comic book. I mentioned this one in notable sales last week because there were only a couple sales here or there, and it felt like a strange thing to put in there because it's not a book that's available at your LCS. However, it's also not like a store exclusive unless we want to count Milkbone as a store. This is just one of those weird oddities. But with that all said, this particular book is topping the list because, you know what? In comparison to what we've already had on the list, volumes are there. We've had over 40 sales of this book with averages about $56, highs hitting $70 just for the comic alone. If you want to get it with the box of Milkbones, those are going to go about $85 for the two together. Strange days when we're buying dog biscuits as speculation, but that's where we're at, folks. And it is kind of fun. I will admit, it is kind of fun to go and collect these weird little oddities. Now, we could have talked about Battle Beast again, but check realistically, volumes and prices are down, even though they are still all the rage and tons of copies moving. Prices are ticking down on most of those Battle Beasts books, and volumes are down a little bit, which opens the door for something like this Superman book to go in and sneak in and take that number 1 spot this week because, again, it stood out from the pack of what was left. A lot of fun stuff this week, a lot of new books, a lot of new blood on the list. It's always good to see. Hopefully you enjoyed that, and don't go anywhere. Make sure you guys stick around for the qualified starting up next. The boys are going to be talking about some cowboy comics. That's right, some cowboy comics, because who doesn't love a good Western? Apart from that, they'll also be covering the outside looking in, as well as some other fun segments that they do every week over on the qualified, starting up right after this. And as for me, I'll see you all later with some more content. All right, later.